Welcome, everyone, to Courageous Creative Conquerors. This is Jean Voice Dart. It's my belief that everyone has a gift of creative expression. We were born to express ourselves to stay healthy and happy. Whether you are planting a garden, writing a story, building a cabinet, sewing a scarf, or singing a song, what matters is expressing from the heart. And the creative and expressive arts are a healthy coping strategy that shifts us from trauma to triumph. So join me as we listen and learn key tips and techniques from our special guest and courageous creative conqueror. Our special guest today is Kathy Harmon-Luber, author and fine arts photographer. I'm Jean Voice Dart, and I have with me a very special guest today, Kathy Harmon-Luber. She's here to share with us her beautiful photographic art and also her journey as a writer. And I'm just so happy to have you here. Welcome, Kathy.
Thank you, Jean. I'm delighted to be here.
Can you start with sharing what it was like growing up as a child?
Yeah, I grew up in Pennsylvania, and we lived there until I was about 16 years old, and it was the most magical, idyllic growing up period. Our house was at the edge of a woods, and I was a really creative child from a very early age. I think everybody in our family noticed that about me. I was always, drawing or coloring or singing. And it was funny. I was like 3 years old. My mom used to play piano. And in fact, she once used to sing with Henry Mancini and
Oh,
play piano.
wow.
Yeah. And so she was sitting at the piano one day, and I was 3 years old, and I crawled up on the bench, and she started teaching me piano at that point.
Oh,
And
my
so
goodness.
I was very musical from an early age. And about at 7 years old, I guess, I started playing classical flute.
Wow, that's amazing. You had such a creative childhood and so supported by your family and particularly your mother. And so let's take a look at some of these photos of you growing up here. Here we
Great.
go here. So tell us about this photo here. What are we looking at?
Oh, I love that photo. I was about 4 years old. I'm the chubby little girl on the left with the orange shorts, and I'm sitting beside my mom and her father and mother, my grandparents, and they are holding my little sister Terry.
Oh,
And by 4 years old, I was already very, very much into art and music and nature. And while my mom really, really encouraged me in art, especially drawing and painting and things like that when I was a kid, my dad instilled the love for classical music. He was always playing classical records and of nature.
and where is this? Where was this taken?
We lived, and I grew up in Monaca, Pennsylvania, which is just northwest of Pittsburgh.
Mm, okay. So let's look at this next picture here. This is a wonderful picture. I think I have one that looks kind of the same with that same hairdo there.
Same here too. My mother loved to fix my hair, and I had a lot of it.
And the barrettes and
And
the
the
flip.
black, everything, I know, and the little scarf. And I was
Yeah.
only in the second grade, but I looked very stylish.
You look very sophisticated for second grade. Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, second grade, I was very, very much into music at that point. I was taking piano lessons. I believe I had started voice lessons. I was taking dance lessons
Wow.
and doing a lot of drawing and painting and things like that. And I started classical flute playing at that point. Yes, lessons.
Wow. So they had flute playing in the second, or you took private lessons or in
I
the school?
Well, in school we were allowed to choose an instrument, and I had thought about choosing violin.
Mhm.
My dad played a lot of classical music, and I just knew violins, I guess, and so I wanted to choose that, and my mother said, "Why don't you pick up the flute?" And I did, and I was the only kid there it was a big room, we all got to go around and pick and try different instruments. I was the only kid who could get a sound out of the flute on the first try. So they
Oh,
said, okay, your flute. And I loved it. I always loved it. And I still
it
play in it.
takes a lot of lung power. I'm a flute player myself, so
I know.
yeah, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Let's look ahead here. Here we go. So what is happening here? This is a lovely photo. Where are you?
Dumbarton Oaks. It was pretty close to where I lived in Washington, D.C. I was in Washington or the Washington area for 12 years. And I lived at DuPont Circle for a long while. And this was very, very close, Dumbarton Oaks. And a friend took this of me. I was in my 20s, and you know, my parents really encouraged me when I was a kid in the arts. And then when it came time to major in something in college, they said, absolutely not. And so I moved off to Washington, D.C. after college. And that is where it rekindled my passion for the arts.
Oh,
There were galleries everywhere. I submitted my photographs to gallery shows. I worked at
wow.
the Smithsonian, and I was writing at that time. I worked at George Washington University in their publishing education program. And my boss and I did some writing for the Washington Post. And so I really just, it was like my great rekindling of all of the arts. And that photo pretty much sums up, that's where I was at that point in my life. Yeah,
So you were very, very happy and productive creatively.
I
Yeah.
was indeed. Yes.
So you wrote for the Washington Post. What kind of writing did you do?
It was for their weekend section, about everything from gifts, great, unusual gifts for the holidays, to little travel around Washington pieces, that kind of thing. And I worked at the Smithsonian. I did a lot of marketing writing there for what was called the Residence Associate Program. And they did classes and workshops and all kinds of interesting things at all the Smithsonian museums. So I really very much got into writing at that point, as well as other forms of art.
You know, what I love about your story is you didn't just stay in one particular modality of art. You just love all the arts.
I really
And
did.
why is that? What is important about the expressive arts?
I just, from a very young age, I just felt it was like a hunger inside of me just to
Mhm.
express myself, whether it was dance or writing or photography. My father was a semi-professional photographer, and he always had his camera lying around. And so when I was in my late teens, I got very, very interested in photography, and he taught me. So I was pretty much self-taught, except for hands-on with him. And that's when I took his camera everywhere with me. I was in a singing group when I was a late teenager,
Mhm.
and we would travel across the country for 3 weeks out of the
Oh,
summer. And I was the sort of official photographer of the group. I was always taking photos, and he kindled that interest in and great love in photography that continues to this day. Yeah.
you are photographer, you are a musician, you are an artist, you are a writer, you are just this Renaissance woman doing all these different things. But let's talk about you as a courageous, creative conqueror. Did you have struggles growing up in childhood or young adulthood that you overcame because of your passion through the expressive arts? The arts helped you heal or helped you get through difficult times. Can you share a little bit about that?
Many, 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 many times, art and nature too, because that was all wrapped up in my art, actually. Love of nature and art got me through so many hard times in my life. As a child, I was very, very painfully shy as a
Mm.
little girl, and I was very different from other kids, very, very artistic. And I think like a lot of artists, we get bullied, we're misunderstood, all of those things. And I just continued to pour myself into my art. That was my healing. I
So
found,
why, excuse me, why were you bullied? Was there any particular reason?
I think I was just different, you know. I was really shy, very, very quiet.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have a lot of confidence at a
Okay.
young age. I had very little confidence, and I was really smart. I was good at the, math and the sciences. And I
Mhm.
think, kids can be mean. We know how that goes, and
Yes.
they tend to, if you're really smart, they tend to not like you or whatever. But I found that art was, it helped me so many times. Like later
Yes.
later in my teen years, I began to face depression.
Mm.
Art and music helped me through that. Art and music have been very, very, very healing in my life. And
Mm-hmm.
then it's interesting, when I was in my early 20s, one of those photos that you showed, Jean, I got the diagnosis that I had very serious spinal issues that were hereditary. And that was a trauma. And about that same time, my grandfather, who I was so very close to, my grandfather in the photo, he and my grandmother very much encouraged me in the arts and music, especially. And he passed.
Oh,
And it was a really, really difficult time for me to get all of these things happening at the same time. And so art got me through it. Writing,
yes.
I've always been a journal writer, probably
Yes, me
since
too.
a
Yes.
little girl,
Mhm.
and so I express myself through journaling, through poetry, through all the other arts I've mentioned, and it really got me through. And so fast forward to age 40, and the first disc in my back, the spinal disc, ruptured,
Mm.
leaving me pretty incapacitated for nearly a year. And I worked. I was executive director of a foundation in Los Angeles, and I was just completely, um, I was completely disabled. There was nothing I could do, basically. It was all very hard. But the one thing I could always do was art,
Yes.
and,
Uh-huh.
and music, and not so
Yes.
much photography at that point. And then, there were more disc ruptures and more spinal problems. And I wasn't really active. I was an avid hiker in nature. I was always a dancer and gymnastics and a runner.
A
And
dancer too. Wow.
yeah,
Okay.
as a young girl. But
Uh-huh.
but when I was in college, I had, because of the back injury, some
Yes.
very difficult problems. So I didn't get far in that, but I still love dancing. But the long story short, when 5 years ago the disc ruptured, the fourth disc ruptured so disastrously, left me bedridden for basically 5 years. There
Yes.
wasn't much I could do. I had to learn. I couldn't stand at my easel. I performed classical flute at that point almost every weekend with a partner. Couldn't do that. Couldn't get out
Yes.
in nature.
I
All of
understand
those
that.
things,
Yeah.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
so I had to really examine my life and say, and kind of take inventory. There's a chapter in my book about this, taking inventory. What can I do? And asking the right questions, not why me? Why did this happen to me? When will this be over? Will it be over? But to really focus on, okay, well, this is what it is. I'm lying flat on my back in bed. What can I do? And the
Well,
one,
let's take a look at what you did. Let's
yes,
take a look at some of your art and your art journey. When we look at the paintings, it kind of tells what was happening with you physically, mentally, emotionally as well, I think. So it'll be interesting to
absolutely.
hear your comments on each of
Great.
the pictures. So let's take a look here. You have a series of black and white photos. Now, when did this happen? Was this before you were bedridden? And about what time was this in your life journey?
Yeah, this was in my 30s. I had moved to West Los Angeles, and I was always into black and white photographs, but I don't know, there's something just magical about
Yes.
light out here, right, in California.
Mm-hmm.
So this was an agave plant I took in Santa Monica, actually. And I did a whole series of these types that they almost look like they're lit from within. It's
Mhm.
very it's a very grainy, intentionally grainy
Yeah, texture.
photograph.
Yeah.
Give it texture precisely.
Yes. There's
Yeah,
something about black and white that just has a lot more emotional expression for me. I don't know. There's
thank
something.
you.
Yeah,
Yeah, me
I really
too.
feel that with the black and white. I think because it just strips everything else away and you're left with feeling, a lot of feeling. So, what about this
I
one?
think Key West cat. I have a very dear friend, and at one point in time, she lived in Key West, and I used to go down and visit her quite a lot. And one day we were, nothing glamorous. We were waiting to get into a little cafe to have brunch, and they were in line, she and a couple other friends, and I just sort of walked up and down the street, and there was this lovely cat posing for me. And again, a very, very grainy photograph that just brings out sort of the intensity of those eyes. And I think it's very intriguing. Like, what's the cat looking
Yes.
at?
Let's move on here. You've got a few other black and white photos. What about this one?
This is taken out in the Mojave Desert. I have a great love of Joshua Tree National Park, and that's where this one was taken. And about this time, I was probably in my mid 30s, and I fell in love with infrared photography. And again, this is all film. This is not digital yet. And I just love the intensity. Infrared takes things that have chlorophyll in them, like leaves, and makes them very white. And it makes the
Mm.
sky very, very black in the shadows. And so the contrast of this image is
Yes, the contrast,
exquisite, right?
dark, and then down below the shadow. Yeah. All right.
This is when I was also experimenting with black and white infrared and sepia toning in the darkroom.
Mm.
And I love these horses. They came from all the way across the field where those others are. I'm sure they were looking for a carrot or an apple or a treat, but I thought they were beautiful.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and I traveled a lot during those years, my 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. I traveled a lot. And one of my favorite US destinations is Santa Fe and Taos, New Mexico. And this is taken at the Taos Pueblo. And there's something about the light and the quality of the light at Taos, which if memory serves, is about 10 or 11,000 feet in altitude. It's just such brilliant light. And I love the play of the colors against the,
Yes.
oh,
And how was this created here?
yeah. Okay. This is simply a photograph of the play of light on the surface of the water. There are others in this series that have the koi fish, in them, but this is simply the way the light was hitting the surface of the water and all of those beautiful waves and reflections.
So there was no graphic editing.
Nothing. That is
Oh, looks like
out of the
you
camera.
edited it. Yeah.
Oh, no, 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 not at all.
Yeah, doesn't it? I mean, yeah.
Yes.
And is this when you were starting to experience those physical challenges that you mentioned earlier?
Starting to, yes,
Hmm.
yes. It's been a big challenge since my 20s, but in my 40s and 50s, it became very severe. I would define this as a double exposure. When I was traveling in Venice, I took a series of art papers with me that I got at Michael's and Joanne Fabrics, and little bits of paper you can see up there in the left there. It looks like some newsprint or something. And I did double exposures of art papers and photographs.
I love it.
Oh, like this one. This is, yes, this is um, a distressed art paper, and the Doge's palace, looking up at the balcony there. And I, you know, Venice and obviously other places in the world are so beautiful. Just taking the photo of the places, that they're exquisite. but there's something about combining it with a collage paper that gives it a whole different feel. Like this makes it look very old, like the photograph was taken long ago in time, right?
Yes. Mm, beautiful.
Thank you.
Ooh, and look at all this. Yeah, what
Okay.
fun.
All right, this is interesting. This is beyond. I love exploring neighborhoods off the beaten track, and this is in the Rialto, but way far from the bridge and the market and all of that, in a little neighborhood. And I kept all of my art papers I used for the double exposures in a folder that had butterflies on it. So this is the folder. So I would take the double exposure, I would take the facade of the building, and then I would, take the double exposure holding up that folder. And that's how I got the butterflies into the
Mm.
image.
And writing on there
And the
too.
writing is on the folder. Yes.
Mm.
Some of
And it
these,
looks like a fence, a wire.
yeah, some
Yeah,
of these
amazing.
I sort of cobbled together different things too. Like there'll be little bits of paper or letters or writing or music. Some in the series have old sheet music, give it a
Okay.
very different feel.
Yeah. Now we shift to a series about peace. Can you
Yes,
talk about that? And
yes.
where are you in your journey right now, your life journey?
My life journey, this is mere months before the disastrous disc rupture. My husband and I, um, this is in 2016, we went to Carpinteria, which is on the coast of California, south of Santa Barbara. And we went there for Thanksgiving for 4 or 5 days. And immediately outside of our place where we were staying, there was the ocean. But I have to back up for a second, because what was happening in the world at that time were the attacks on Paris, and the we were hearing about it in the car as we were driving to Carpinteria, and I thought to myself, we're always talking about impending disasters and impending war. Why do we not talk about impending peace, right? And I started, my husband was driving, and I pulled out my sketchbook in the car, and I started just sketching out ideas of things I wanted to paint with acrylic paints or watercolors. And when we got to our place in Carpinteria, I walked out and looked at the water, and I'd been wanting to do some very long exposure photographs to capture motion. And this is a wave breaking across rocks.
Oh, I see it now.
And it
Yes. Okay.
everybody says it looks like an angel wing, but it's
No, I see it. Oh, well, that's
a
beautiful.
wave, and you can see the
Yeah.
rocks and a bit of the algae, or seagrass or something
Mhm.
under the surface of the water. And I thought, in that moment, sometimes there are just these amazing moments, Jean, behind the camera, or I'm sure you feel it when you're painting or making music, where everything just clicks perfectly and you're in the flow and you just know that you're capturing something that has meaning. And I didn't even know how much meaning it was about to have, but I just knew it to be an important moment for me in my art. And so
Beautiful.
it was the first image I took for the impending peace series. And
Oh,
I think it has
wonderful.
probably 15 or 20 images in the whole series.
This is Choose Peace.
And it is just
Okay.
the reflection of the sun on the sand and water. And again, a long exposure to capture that.
Yes. And then this is Visions of Peace.
Mhm.
How lovely. Look at that ripple there. Look at that. And then Spring Splendor.
Yeah, quickly. This was taken in San Juan Capistrano, and I was there with friends celebrating a birthday, and we went to a little garden store, and it was just an arbor that had bougainvillea growing on it, and the
Oh,
blue sky. And I took this longer exposure and panned the camera, and that's what gives you the beautiful ripple of light. It's also the image that's behind me as we speak.
oh, yes, definitely. Oh, and isn't this lovely? And you have
Okay.
a rose series of several.
Yeah,
So,
and I call it Dream Blossoms, Dreams Blossom, for a reason. This begins the most recent and most difficult part of my healing journey when the disc ruptured in December of 2016, right after that trip to Carpinteria where I did Impending Peace. I was flat on my back for way too long. I was bedridden for 5 years. Let's leave it at that. So after about a year of being completely flat on my back, my husband would often bring me, flowers. And they'd sit on the dresser, and I wanted to take photographs so much. All I had been doing creatively at that point was journal writing. And he said, I think we can do this. And he found my tripod and my camera in my studio, and he set it up in our bedroom, and he put the flowers in the
Wonderful
light.
husband.
And I was able to stand up for about 5 minutes and take photographs.
Oh,
And I found that I could do that for about 5 minutes before, rushing back to bed in pain. And I was so thrilled, Jean. It was like, I can't even explain what it felt like to be able to get back to my art and photography at that point after not being able to do it for so long. And so he was on a mission, and he would set it up. I'd wait until the light would be just perfect on that flower. And then I'd get up out of bed and frame the shot and take a few photos of it. And that's the way this portfolio was born. And I actually, at the end of like a year and a half of shooting, I actually had a gallery show with those images.
oh. Can you please tell everyone, how are you feeling right now? Are you able to get out of the bed and walk? Are you still limited in your mobility and in managing your pain? How are you doing?
I think when something happens, like a health crisis, you realize how precious your time and your energy are. And, I rest really, really, really well and really deeply and do robust self-care so that I can get out of bed and, cook a dinner or sit on the deck and enjoy the garden or get up
Yes.
and do some artwork or play some music. I've learned how to adapt, and it gets back to what I said earlier. It's about taking inventory and figuring out, what can I do? I can't play my classical flute at all for
Yes.
5 minutes, but I can play my Native American flutes and my
Yeah.
Celtic flute, right?
Great. Oh, I really love this one. This one is the one that you used for your book. And when is it going to be released? When is your book launch?
May 17th.
I'm just so excited for you. And before we go, could you shared a little bit about, just believing in yourself and finding a creative way to do something else. And could you give some advice for those who are listening and are inspired about your journey, who are creative artists, musicians, dancers, theater, whatever, and who are struggling maybe with not so much physical challenges, which you went through, but maybe emotional or mental, which you also went through, of thinking, I'm not good enough, low self-esteem, these kinds of things. You're thinking, well, who am I to write this book or, post my artwork or whatever. Can you share some tips?
One of the things I would say is easier said than done, but I write about this in my book. Your mind is your medicine. And I find that so much of overcoming things in life, and it doesn't have to be illness or injury, so much of it is our perception and getting a bird's eye view on what things mean. And trust me, in the depths of depression, this was impossible, but when we're tenacious about it, I have this little visualization that I do that I'll share if you have time, just a second, that is to help get an aerial view and see infinite possibilities for our lives. And it goes like this, you do all the usual things, you get quiet, you close your eyes, you get comfortable, you take some deep breaths, and then you imagine yourself weightless, floating up into the clouds,
I like
up
that.
above, into the space, deep space, where there are stars and the moon and planets. And you're just floating there free. And you look down at the earth, and every problem that we have, every judgment that we worry about, every comparison that we make ourselves and others, as artists tend to do, they don't matter. You're just up there and
Yes.
floating above everything. And out there are infinite possibilities. So from
Ooh,
that place,
yeah.
I like to just hold on to that feeling and then come back down to earth and my writing or my art or my photography and say, okay, from that place of peace, basically, in our hearts and souls, what wants to be expressed? What needs to be expressed today? And just do it from a place of no judgment and not making art with a capital A, right?
Yes, very good. Yay, that's a great way for us to close. Thank you so much. It's been such a joy listening to you with so much to offer. You really have a lot to give to the world, and you are doing it. You're doing all of it. You're an inspiration of someone that's overcome obstacles and is moving forward. And you're just so creative. You have so much to give. So thank you so much, Kathy. It's been so much fun having you. And thank you, our listeners, for listening.
And thank you, Jean.
Yes.
It's been an honor to be here and share with you. Thank you for what you do. You're inspiring.
Thank you. It's my joy to be here with you. All right, everybody. We'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.
Bye.
To see more Courageous Creative Conquerors videos, join the weekly Creative Community calls, or learn more about private sessions, visit jeanvoicedart.com.